The system's operating the way it is supposed to, so we'll be starting again to uh, do videos on the stories of the day. Today, the story is the increasing snow cover across the hemisphere. You can see virtually all of Russia now is snow covered, extends south into China, into Afghanistan, uh, and west into parts of Europe, and this area will increase rapidly over the next few days. You can see how cold the air is over uh, Russia. The temperatures below 50 degrees, below zero over the next 16 days. The zero in gray extends back to Western Russia, Scandinavia, and single digits, the 20s, into Europe, where snow will fall, and you can see that snow heavy in parts of Russia, parts of Eastern Europe, parts of Central Europe, the Alps. We'll be getting snow. There'll be some up in the UK, and some unusually far south, perhaps even to the Atlas Mountains in North Africa. Uh, Moscow had a snowstorm this past week. It was said to be the worst November snowstorm in 50 years. On our continent, Anchorage and Fairbanks are getting early winter again, much as they did last year. This is Anchorage, Alaska. If you recall, last year Anchorage set a record for seasonal snow, beating out 1954 and 55, 55, 56. In 2003 and 4, one of our analog years for heavy snow uh, in their record book, and you can see with the cold and the snow that the Bering Sea ice was very extensive. In fact, it set a record for the year since the satellite era began in '79. It peaked at a higher level last year and hung on longer than normal in most years, and it's coming roaring back. Now, Anchorage also had very cold temperatures. It was a seesaw kind of pattern with a mild October, brutal November, warmer December, very, very cold January, 14.6 degrees below normal Fahrenheit. Milder February, but then a cold March, a cold May, and a cold July. Then now a cold November. It's very possible that if December is cold, it could rank as one of the coldest years on record there. And you can see that plot of Anchorage temperatures with that 60-day cycle and temperatures evident dampening as you move into the summer months. Now, Anchorage temperatures and temperatures in Alaska in general vary with the PDO in almost stepladder fashion. When the PDO is warm, there tends to be warm water in the North Pacific off of Alaska, and not surprisingly, temperatures jump. When the PDO turns cold, they fall. You can see that happened here in the last cold period in late 70s. When the PDO turned positive again, it jumped, and it has really declined after 2006 and 7. Those data points are not shown here, but temperatures are way down here on an annual basis, much more like they were in the last two cold PDO eras. Now, there's another index that, besides the PDO, that's related to the PDO, called the North Pacific Index, a measure of pressure over the North Pacific. And when the Aleutian low is strong, as it is typically in the warm PDO, El Nino years, it pumps warm air into Alaska and temperatures rise. When the Aleutian low is weak, and or there's high pressure in here, it allows cold air to build, as we saw last winter and in recent winters. And you can see how well the North Pacific Index inverted ties in with the 5-year running mean temperatures. So the oceans really drive the climate change in Alaska. As you look at the North Atlantic, we see last year with a very cold Alaska and a warm North Atlantic, negative uh, a positive NAO, North Atlantic Oscillation, very strongly positive November, December, January, and March, that with the cold Alaska, we couldn't get that cold to form another trough in the eastern United States, as it had prior to winters when the NAO was extremely negative. And we think that will be different this year. Part of this related to the Atlantic sea surface temperature patterns being disrupted a little bit. And this year they're back in their typical warm AMO tripole that favors more blocking. Now we know the Arctic ice breeze increases and decreases depending on whether the oceans are warm. And for a while in the late 90s, both the Pacific and the Atlantic were warm, and so the water entering the Arctic was greater, and it was significant melting taking place. The Atlantic continues in its warm mode. The Pacific turned colder, especially after 2006 and 7. And you can actually see that if you look at the comparison of 2007, and this happens to be the same day, 11/28, in 2012, you can see there's more ice on the Pacific side now than there was back in 2007, but less ice on the Atlantic side. There's been a little bit more in the way of melting due to the warm Atlantic that has occurred since 2007. When the Atlantic turns cold, both sides will increase again, and this area in here will fill in with ice, and the ice cover will increase once again, as it did after the similar thing happened in the 1950s, the 60s and 70s. The ice returned in a big way. The pattern this year in terms of the NAO, we look at the analog, suggests that we do get a negative NAO in December, even with the trough off the west coast and very cold in Alaska and in Russia. And of course into Europe, and but we get a trough in the eastern United States because we see a return of the blocking that was absent last year. And the latest European 12Z North Atlantic Oscillation bias continues the trend of a negative NAO as we move into first 10 days of December. Well, that's something we'll be tracking. Models point toward warm weather certainly over the next week. A few cold intervals in that period, very brief, but a cooling that begins in a serious way by mid-month. And as Joe said, later part of the month should be very exciting.